So let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody, and peace be upon you. Thank you for joining us for this important event on the path of justice and the path of social justice. This event has been brought to you by the BSU, Student Life, Mission and Ministry, and our Office of DEI. And this event is to honor Black History Month. So just to lay out the sequence, so Imam Idris will first share his wisdom, and then will be joined by Sister Kathy Nerney to engage in a round of dialogue to explore the topic a little bit further. So we know Imam Idris, he needs no introduction, but very briefly, he's the resident Imam of a mosque nearby, Masjidullah, and the Center of Human Excellence. He was appointed to Governor Josh Shapiro's Advisory Committee for African American Affairs. He's the Chief of Staff for a large municipal department. He serves on the board of Ceasefire Pennsylvania. He's a member of Multi-Faith Neighbors Network. He's a filmmaker, director, and producer, and a whole lot more, but his full biography is out there on the table. I'll start by quoting from the Holy Quran. In the Holy Quran, our scriptures, God enjoins Muslims to issue in the following call to Christians and Jews who are honorable, referred to as the people of the scripture. In chapter 3, verse 64. Say, O people of the scripture, come to a common word between us and you, that we shall worship none other than God, that we shall ascribe no partner to him, and that none of us shall take others for lords besides God. This commandment is designed to build common ground of dialogue. In the Holy Bible, in the Gospel of Mark 12:31, we are told, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other greater commandment than this. In Maxim 39, we are told to be of service to the world. The best service is one that shares your gifts and gives you life. Imam Idris, my brother, we at Chestnut Hill share our love and gift of dialogue and want to learn and share so that we may collectively, as Americans, as a family of Christians and Muslims, and children of one Creator, share in our wisdom as we struggle in the path of justice and piety, inshallah, God willing. Imam Idris, welcome back, brother. They haven't good.
So we begin with the words of peace. We say Assalamu alaikum in our tradition, which means peace be unto you. Thank you once again, Professor Aziz, for extending the invitation. Sister Kathy, all the folks here at Chestnut Hill College. Last year we had a very engaging conversation around honoring the past and shaping the future. And we come to you today with the invitation once again to share at a very, very pivotal time, which is why the topic today is honoring the past, but defending the future, and talking about inclusion in an era or in an uncertain era. As stated, I am Imam Idris Abdul Zahir, resident Imam of Masjidullah, the Center for Human Excellence. I come from a long tradition of Muslims and Imams that have engaged in civic engagement, have been very active in engaging our neighbors in interfaith efforts and making sure that we are finding common ground to address and to tackle the problems of the day and making sure that we as neighbors are working together to secure each other's, not just our safety and progress, but just looking after each other's neighborly needs. This is one of the things that is honored highly in the Islamic tradition. So with that being said, I have a very aggressive topic to try and condense into 30 minutes. I've tried my best to try and do that. There's so much more. Every one of these morsels of information, I can go down a whole rabbit hole for each of them. So I will try to keep it concise and leave some of it for the question and answer afterwards. But I want to just start with that backdrop. That's the tradition that we come from. That's the tradition that I come from. My mosque, Masjid Allah, is like a baby or a daughter of what started off as Temple Number 12 in the Nation of Islam. So if you know Malcolm X, if you know the folks that were part of that movement, our mosque transitioned out of that movement back in 1975, but still kept went away from black nationalism and went into the universal message of Al-Islam, and threw off a lot of the black nationalist ideas and came into universal acceptance of Islam. Everybody's our brother and our sister. And then now we focus mostly on trying to engage with the world and looking out for our neighbors. So that being said, our topic, honoring the past, defending the future, inclusion in an uncertain era. I want to first start by honoring the legacy of where all this began, acknowledging the enduring impact of historical struggles of civil rights movement that mostly started after the post-construction era in America. So this is after the Civil War, when America is reconstructing and African Americans are now free and are able to be landowners for the first time, are able to set up their own business for the first time en masse, and are in a space where a lot of the Jim Crow laws have not quite come into space yet. So post-construction era starts, and then a bunch of laws, Jim Crow laws as they were called, were put in place to kind of restrict African American life. And most of that was along the lines of racial segregation, of course, right? So key milestones came out of that was the Plessy versus Ferguson decision that basically established separate but equal. So you were equal citizens, but you had separate accommodations, which basically legalized segregation and different treatment of African Americans. And then also the Great Migration. The Great Migration was essentially when my grandparents and great-grandparents, who at that time were all sharecroppers, started to leave the sharecropping life because it was just another form of slavery, and started to move to the major cities, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, Milwaukee, places like this, Detroit, where there was industrialization. And so you could leave the farm life, the sharecropping life, and move to the north or move to a large city and get work in a factory and be able to take care of your family. So this was part of the Great Migration at the beginning of, I would say at the end of the 19th century, going into the early 20th century. But as that started to happen, of course, we started to see more segregation and more systemic racism. So this is the context upon which we talk about all of this, right? And the role of faith in civil rights movements. So faith has always been at the core of the civil rights movement in America. Most of the movements and most of the biggest impetus to throw off segregation was organized at churches, organized at mosques, organized at temples as well, at synagogues as well. So one famously, which I visited last year, was the 16th Street Baptist Church, which was famously bombed and 4 little girls were killed. But this is where one of the marches that Martin Luther King led, it started off at 16th Street Baptist Church. It was organized at the church. Everyone in the whole community, from children up to the adults, all organized at the church, and the march started there. And unfortunately, terrorists targeted the church because of its ability to organize people and to mobilize them against, for their civil rights. So this is the role that the mosque has played. Now, Muslims didn't take a centralized approach when it came to marches, but the Nation of Islam at that time would quietly, secretly give money to those causes, would fund a lot of the black Democrats, send money for them to travel, send money for them to do Black Caucus events, quietly. So quietly, the Muslim movement supported the civil rights movement, but didn't necessarily organize their people to go march. Of course, key figures: Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X. Again, Martin Luther King, we went through this really in depth last time. We went through the different approaches, right? Martin Luther King Jr. and that movement championed nonviolent resistance, emphasizing love, equality, and justice through methods of peaceful protest. So peaceful protest was at the core of it. And that's not that Malcolm X advocated violence, right? He advocated self-defense, human rights, and encouraging Black empowerment, doing for self. So where one had an approach where it was segregation, to integrate into society, the other Black Muslim approach was to separate, it can't go to a lunch counter and be treated with respect and be able to get the services that every human being should be able to get. Then establish your own restaurants, get your own markets, do your own everything. And that was their approach. Both wanting the same thing, both going towards human dignity, wanting to be able to be full citizens in America, but different approaches. One was to integrate and one was to separate. But again, two powerful figures at a critical time in our nation's history. So what are the major achievements? 3 big major achievements were the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. Civil Rights Act, of course, most of us know this piece of legislation is what essentially gave rights to African Americans. And I always say this, very matter-of-factly when this comes up, because we act as if this was so far long ago. But my generation, Generation X, is the first generation of African Americans born with all the rights of American citizenship. My father wasn't born with that. My mother wasn't born with that. They weren't born with the right to vote, right? They didn't have civil rights. That they could be legally segregated against and nothing would happen, right? And so my generation is the very first generation born with those rights. And the trajectory and the possibilities for my life are totally different from what it was for my father and my mother living in a segregated America. And that's just the reality of that situation. So this was a huge piece of legislation, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. My father turned 18 in 1965. So the first time he was legally able to actually exercise his vote was the same time his mother and father were able to actually vote. The same time his grandmother, who was still living at the time, was actually able to vote. And I believe his great-grandmother was still living at the time. So you're talking about 3 to 4 generations of African Americans who had been disenfranchised from being able to choose their representation from every aspect of life. So this is huge. So Voting Rights Act is enabled. That summer, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 is passed. This is critical and pivotal because prior to this, most of the immigration, legal immigration into America came from mostly European nations, okay? And this is big for the Muslim community because prior to this time period, African majority countries and Southeast Asian majority countries or Arab countries were given small allotments for immigration, about 100 people maybe, prior to 1965 per year. And one of the examples I always use is from the founding of Pakistan. So Pakistanis are probably one of the largest non-African Muslim populations in America. They rank around 600 to 700,000 people. So prior to, from 1947, the founding of Pakistan to 1965, only about 2,500 Pakistanis were let into the country legally, okay? In the 20-year period after that, 100,000. And so you see the difference between 1947 and 1965, 2,500, and 20 years after that, about 100,000. And then, of course, now about 600,000 to 700,000 Pakistanis are in the country. And I think Pennsylvania ranks about the 10th most as far as Pakistanis. I say that to say that one of the largest groups of Muslim demographic was only allowed into this country for to be any other Muslim population than African Americans based upon this legislation. And I'm going to come back to this legislation later in our presentation because you'll see how critical and important it was to opening up America, the diversity of America, and what we know to be America, meaning essentially a nation of immigrants, right? So important laws that changed the face of America a bit. Now, the importance of all of these things was the role of coalition building. Coalition building, bringing diverse groups together, finding common ground. We all come from different backgrounds, but bringing people together based upon common shared values is what helped a lot of these laws come into place. Now, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights is a coalition that basically led the push for civil rights. It's made up of over 240 different groups, namely many of them, the NAACP, National Urban League, Southern Poverty Law Center, American Civil Liberties Union, AFL-CIO. Some of these groups, of course, are legal liberties groups, some are labor unions, but all different backgrounds, but all coming together for one common cause. And 240 different groups were a part of this coalition. It shows you the level of organization, shows you the level of reaching across the aisle. It shows you the level of intent behind trying to shift and change this reality for our most vulnerable citizens. So that's that's a super quick background on all of this and how we got here, right? But what are our present day challenges? In the current political climate, we understand that there are some direct challenges to the gains of this movement, the 50, 60 years, people dying, people sacrificing a whole lot. I have people in my congregation who walked with Dr. King. I have one individual who was a pallbearer for Dr. King. I have people who help integrate different schools here in Philadelphia. I have people who sacrificed going to school and were out on the picket lines and being activists and sacrificed their school to integrate schools. So a lot of people paid a lot for us to be sitting here together in peace today. And so it's important that we understand, first off, some of the history, but also what the present day challenge is. So many of you if I could just see a show of hands, how many of you have heard about or read Project 2025? Okay, so I don't have to go too deep into Project 2025 then, right? So we understand this to be a right-wing initiative focusing on reshaping governmental policies, potentially undermining vital civil rights gains and reversing 50, 60 years of hard-fought gains for social progress. And this is a substantial threat, again, to not just the laws of the land, but just even how we socially engage with each other. And, you know, of course, it does damage to what we're trying to do here. We'll just make a more inclusive environment for everyone. So this is just the impact of the last Trump administration, okay? A lot of legislation, executive orders were all aimed at trying to lessen or trying to enact or impact immigration here in America. There was a study that came out actually during the Trump administration that essentially said that by 2050, America would be a minority, majority country, and people went crazy. Some folks went totally ballistic. What does this mean? And, you know, and the reaction was somewhat extreme, I would say, right? But out of this study came many shifts and changes. First off, what's dubbed as the Muslim travel ban. The Muslim travel ban essentially was Executive Order 769 and 780, essentially targeted Muslim majority countries, places like Sudan, places like Somalia, and other places, essentially targeted those countries and said no one from those countries can enter into America. Okay? And some of my good friends are Sudanese, okay? So I took that personal. But that being said, it made a serious impact. And if you're in mosques, and many of our mosques are multicultural, there are people there who are worried about being deported, who are worried about if their spouse or their cousin or whoever they want to have come join them in America, if they'll be able to get here. And it tore apart families. So that was a serious executive order that essentially stopped immigration from those countries. Now, of course, it's always put under the guise of national security. We don't know about these people, and othering of these populations, making the American public fearful of them, as they did with African Americans for quite some time, what they did with Jews for quite some time, what they did with the Irish when they came, what they did with every new group that came to America. They were othered, and people were made to feel okay with discriminating against them. All right, and so there's several more here too. I do want to also highlight the family separation policy, which led to thousands of children being separated from their parents at the border. Many of these children were not at an age to be able to speak for themselves. They could not talk. So the potential of a child being separated from their parents and never being reunited was really high. And that's super critical. So these are some of the things that were enacted that really impacted our ability to have a more inclusive America. And then we also saw the resurgence of voter suppression laws. So this is stopping people from voting, right? Now listen, there's always been a sense of apathy amongst some marginalized groups when it comes to voting in general, because they don't always feel like their vote counts. They don't always feel like their opinion or what they want to see happen actually happens. And then you have, on top of that, concerted efforts to stop you from voting, right? And what I always say is, if voting didn't matter, they wouldn't spend so much time and energy trying to prevent you from doing it, right? So these two voter suppression laws are just maybe 2 out of maybe 6 or 7 across the different states that actually were enacted and made it tougher and harder in these states to vote. Georgia, of course, is a battleground state. So you get SB 202, which is the Election Integrity Act. Of course, restricts absentee voting by requiring stricter ID requirements for mail-in ballots, limited drop boxes by reducing their number and hours of availability. So in places in Philadelphia, we were expanding drop box, we were expanding mail-in voting, and to make it more secure, we put cameras at those locations to made sure that people actually watched it, right? But still opened it up for more people to be able to vote. That same argument was used to restrict voting, to stop these mail-in ballots and to do this. Also, this part right here, criminalizing giving food or water to voters waiting in long lines, right? Does anybody watch Curb Your Enthusiasm? Curb Your Enthusiasm? A couple folks here. So there's a famous episode where Larry, the main character, happens to be in Georgia. The long lines are going on for voting, and the sun is beating down. They just offer someone some water. They come and they see him do it. They lock Larry up. Larry ends up locked up. He turns into a civil rights hero by accident by giving somebody some water while they're waiting in line. Of course, he milks it as much as possible. But it just showed you how ridiculous it is that we have laws against giving people water as they wait in line, because they want to deter people from standing, that they want to create those long lines, make you stand in the summer heat. Hopefully people will quit and don't vote, right? And then even if someone wants to give you some relief by giving you some water or food, it turns into a criminal law and you end up locked up, right? So it was a way of poking fun at the fact that these laws are actually real, and that and that some folks may actually try and take advantage of it, right? And same thing in Texas, some stricter laws as well. So also we've seen legal rollbacks of civil rights protections as we've started to see the avalanche of rollback of DEI. So we've seen from Target to I just heard Penn today and other places now, the gains that the consciousness that came after seeing George Floyd murdered on TV over and over and over and over again, and a lot of the activism that happened after that, all of that is worn off now, because we have an administration that is anti-DEI, right? So we've seen folks that feel like, well, if the president is against it, I'm going to be against it too, and they're rolling it back. So we've seen the rollback of DEI initiatives earlier, or last year we saw the rollback of some affirmative action protections, which were put in place to even the playing field for minorities to get into higher institutions of knowledge, which they were being denied. They were qualified, had the grades, had everything they needed, but were being denied historically, right? And so until affirmative action came in and kind of leveled that playing field, many times they were not offered or given the ability to seek higher learning in places of their choice, right? So those protections have been weakened, and those were hard-fought things that have been rolled back. So these are the things that we're dealing with today. Now, faith perspectives on social justice. What does faith have to say about this? Like I said earlier, the faith community has always played a pivotal role in addressing these issues. It's always been the faith community that's always been in the midst of this, whether it be politicians and joining in with it as well, or other groups. The faith community has always been in the midst of this, always drawing from their holy texts, always drawing from the example of their prophets and holy men and women to do the right thing and stand up for those that are most impacted. And this here is a picture of Imam Muhyiddin Muhammad. He was the leader of our group, which had many names over the years, but he took over the Nation of Islam after his father, Elijah Muhammad, passed away. He's the one that took it out of black nationalism into universal Islam. And many of the teachings that he taught from 1975 going forward was exactly this, was that any good, the Muslim is said that we are to enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong, right? So anything that's good happening in a society, the Muslim should be involved. Anything that is fighting against injustice, the Muslim should be involved. And so this is the tradition in which we come from, motivating believers to take action, not just hate a thing with your heart, but there are three things that our faith teaches us, that if we see a thing or see a wrong or see an injustice, that we should do something about it, take action against it. If we can't take action against it, then we should speak out against it. And if we can't speak out against it, then hate it in our hearts, but this is the weakest of faith. So action has a premium in our faith, right? And so what you see, is grassroots organizations and activism, right? So groups like NAACP, Power, CARE, they're all mobilizing their congregations to engage in activism to address these issues: voting rights, police reform, economic inequality, all these different things. This is faith in action. So it's not just the sermon on Sunday or Friday or Saturday, but then going out into the world and seeing how you can be of assistance, right? One of the verses I wanted to pull out of the Quran that I felt was that is one of the most powerful ones. I resonate with me, I think. Do not let the hatred of a people prevent you from being just. Be just. That is nearer to righteousness. So it's get over your emotions, get over your personal feelings, get over if someone wronged you in the past, if they did something wrong to you, right? Doesn't matter. The closest to righteousness is to be just. To be just, right? There's every people, if you go back far enough, you can point to some other people that wronged your people. You can go back in history and find some time that some group did something wrong to you. If you hold on to that and use that as a reason to be unjust, that is not righteousness, right? So our religion tells us to be righteous, to be just, right? And don't let our emotions, our feelings of things that took place in the past to stop us from being just. And so this is the tenet that we use to move forward and build alliances for inclusion. Again, back to effective alliance building, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in a moment, because we've been doing a lot of that over the last several years, especially because of the challenges that we have currently, but also to prepare for times like this, right? You can't wait until a tragedy happens to start to get to know your neighbor, right? Get to know your neighbor now, right? Because when the fire breaks out and you don't know your neighbor's name, you don't know how many people live in the house, you don't know if they have a dog or a cat or whatever it is, fireman comes to you and says, how many people in the house next door? I don't know. What are their names? So I can call their names. I don't know. Do they have pets? I don't know. Get to know your neighbor, right? Build those alliances, right? Really important, intersectionality in social justice movements. Intersectionality, and this is a word that has come into our lexicon over the last several years. But we all have different parts of our personality or who we are. Some parts of us have privilege, some parts of us are disadvantaged. So I'll just take myself as an example, African American, male, Muslim. As a man in a patriarchal society, there are some privileges that I have, right? As a Muslim, I'm probably not the quite most liked religion on earth right now, right? Right? As an African American. Now, in America, of course, African Americans have been mistreated historically, but no one's going to say that I'm not American and deport me any place, right? even if we're sometimes treated as second-class citizens, we're still not denied citizenship for the most part, right? So that is an advantage to my Muslim brothers who come from other countries, who are here on green cards or H-1B visas, or in the midst of trying to get their citizenship, or maybe they have their citizenship and their brother or sister or mother are still trying to work on that, you know? So maybe they're not the one that's going to go down to, the federal building to agitate. Maybe I'm the one to go, right? And then some of them, many of our Southeast Asians, socioeconomically have more than most African Americans, right? There's always a joke that I say with my Desi friends, my Pakistani friends. All the broke Pakistanis are in Pakistan, right? They only let you in because you got a little bit of money or have something going on, right? So we joke about this, right? So the whole point is that they have advantages in that way, right? And then my Christian friends, my Jewish friends, right? Their whiteness gives access and gives some level of validity to some of the things that we bring forward, right? So it's about finding those common grounds, understanding who you are, what advantages you have, what disadvantages you have to bring to the table to help community, right? Using your privilege to benefit those that are less privileged. And understanding that all of us in some way, we have some privileges, we have some disadvantages, and being wise enough to understand who should be the one speaking for the group at the particular time for whatever is being asked for or being demanded. And it's really important. That's how we are allies to one another and can help one another. So this is an example of strengthening interfaith collaborations. This is my friend, Pastor Kevin Brown. He has a church in South Jersey. He's an evangelical pastor, which is probably right now one of the groups that is most adverse to Muslims in America. And so we're intentional to be in community. And this is my buddy right here, Rabbi Eli Friedman. He's at a synagogue in central Philadelphia. And we work in a group called the Multi-Faith Neighbors Network. And we constantly are looking for opportunities to work together. So we were just in DC together a couple weekends ago for the Global Faith Forum and the International Religious Freedom Summit. That's a whole mouthful. I'll try to say that slowly. But those are all forums that put light on the fact that people of faith around the world are dealing with issues, right? And how the faith community has been a source of support for people dealing with everything from genocides to just women's rights to social economic issues. And so what we do ourselves is every year we come together and think about some of the issues that we can address. We've done different events around food insecurity. We've done events to raise resources for refugees coming to America. We've done events where we've done understanding, so they've come to my mosque and learn about Ramadan. We've then gone to the church and learned about Easter and so forth and so on. So, and not just myself as a leader, I bring my congregation with me, right? So the congregation goes and we learn not just as individuals liking each other, because of course we should be the best examples of our different faith, right? But it's harder when you bring, your congregation with you, because not everybody is, as sophisticated and sometimes say things that may, offend. But the whole point is for us to get to know each other better and be able to be authentically tied together when times of difficulty come, right? So we are allies to one another and supportive of one another. And the role of young leaders and activists. Super important to have young leaders and activists. This is the Black Lives Matter movement. So it was a movement, but the official organization, however you feel about it, was founded by people that were about 30. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, when they were doing all these great things and making all these big speeches and going to the mountaintop and all these places, They were in their 30s. And they were like the elder statesmen, okay? 30s. So young people have been at the center of all of the activist movements. If you name one, name the country, name the century, name the continent, whatever it is, you do it, you got young people involved. So it's critical that the young people be involved, have young leaders driving that social change, because ultimately they're going to inherit the world that we are now managing. So you want to have whatever you establish be embraced by the next generation coming behind you. If they're not involved, once they get in power, they'll erase everything that you just did, right? So it's important that the young folks are involved and are included in those initiatives. So a vision for the future. What are some concrete things that we can do to help shore up some of the gains that have been made? Many of these collaborative efforts, all of this work that we spoke about, what are some of the concrete things? So the first thing is there was the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. This was proposed. Again, this was all part of this whole situation that took place after George Floyd's assassination and a lot of the movements around Voting Rights Act and also police brutality or police reform. All of those things kind of got started, but then kind of like have stalled. But this particular act, again, passed through the House of Representatives in 2021, but it was blocked in the Senate. But here are the key provisions of this act. So it requires states with a history of voter discrimination to get federal approval before making changes to voting laws, preventing discriminatory practices. So currently, those protections were gutted out of the original Voting Rights Act, okay? And so that's why we see all these different changes, all these laws that are being passed in Georgia and Texas and places like this to stop people from voting. Expands judicial review. It makes easier to challenge voting laws that disproportionately impact minority voters. So racism is not as blatant as it used to be, right? So now it's a thing where people will they'll look at demographics, they'll look at who's impacted if I change this or if I change that. If I say, no absentee voting, right? They'll look at the demographics of the folks that do that and say, oh, is 95% African American? Okay, let's get rid of that. Why? Because we tend to vote Democratic. And so they'll look at different voting trends and the demographics behind it, and then put together laws that attack those different groups. Address voter suppression, targets racial gerrymandering. So this is critically important. This just happened in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is one of the most gerrymandered states in the country, okay? They redraw district lines, and in my era, got rid of one of our state reps, one of the black state reps, right? May she rest in peace, right? But the whole point is, though, is what it does then is it carves up districts so that the black vote doesn't matter as much. It helps to make it such that where you used to have a seat of power and have influence over a state rep or the folks in that area, now it's diluted a bit. And so now the state rep who used to have his office up in West Oak Lane for 20 years has moved it down to Chestnut Hill now. No disrespect to my buddy, right? Moved down to Chestnut Hill now, where all the folks make all the big money now, right? And caters to that audience rather than the people that have gotten that kind of attention for the last 20, 30 years, right? Different demographic in Chestnut Hill. No disrespect to Chestnut Hill, right? Right? But this is what happens, right? This is the gerrymandering that happens, and so this law or the advancement of this act would help to protect against that, right? And then finally enhances voting access, strengthens protections for voters in areas with a history of discrimination, including language access and disability accommodations, right? Because we want to make sure that everybody has the right to vote, whether you have language access issues or disabilities, right? So now, educating communities on political threats. This is critically important because some of us, we work our jobs every day. We are trying our best to make sure that we, are doing, our civic, duty, right? By showing up to vote. But sometimes we don't know how to vote on different issues, the questions that are on the ballot. How should I answer the questions on the ballot? Which most folks know who the mayor is. Most folks know who the president is. You may know who the governor is. A lot of folks don't know their state reps. They don't know senators. They don't know council people sometimes either. So making sure that your people are educated and understand political benefits and political threats. Okay, so this is an event that we had at Mass Student Law, partnered with Engage. This is our sister Salima Suswell here, giving people the understanding of their rights as voters, but also breaking down those particular offices and what they do and how to access them and what rights we have. In promoting civic engagement and resistance, making sure that we are part of a process, that you are coming together with people with like minds, pull them together and making sure that your people that are going for office have to come and sit before you and share with you what their plans are and how they're going to benefit you. This right here is the Philadelphia Muslim Community Mayoral Candidates Forum that we held at my mosque and had all the mayoral candidates come and answer our questions. And out of that came the first ever Commission for Muslim Engagement in Philadelphia's history. Myself and Professor Aziz both sit on this commission, but it was the engagement of the Muslim community coming together, all backgrounds from the city, not from the city, whatever, but coming to ask these questions, making sure that our concerns are being met and that they understand that we are very involved in the political process. And then a call to action and importance of unity. Unity amongst diverse groups strengthens movements for equity and justice, right? Now, this one right here was actually a peace walk. And as you can see, Professor Aziz, this guy right here, holding the flag here. There he is right there, right? It's critically important to be a part of things, even if it doesn't directly impact you. This peace walk happened during the height of the violence that was happening in Philadelphia. We had record amount of murders a couple years in a row. I mean, a bunch of us from different faiths, different backgrounds decided to do a peace walk, and we walked through the neighborhood in the streets and chanted that we wanted to have peace and to put the guns down and all these things, and went past the courts, and the kids out there playing basketball, and they heard us too, and they stopped for a moment to see what we were talking about. But I know that for many of the people there, that was not a direct issue for them. It was for people like me. I come from Philadelphia, and most of the people that were impacted by gun violence were young Black men. But to see people care enough, our coalitions for other things, right? For other issues that matter to Aziz or matter to the other folks that we showed up for them. So in our moment when we needed people to come together and call for peace and ask these young men and women to put these guns down and stop this violence, they were there, right? And that is what the coalition building is about. Because when you need someone, the issue may not be their central issue. It may not be the thing that, is going to get them up in the morning, but they know you. They care about you. And we've put in the time and the relationship in the community so that when the call for humanity comes, the call for help comes, right? The work has already been put in, the care is already there, and people show up. It helps to deepen the advocacy, and it helps, again, communities, it enhances our community resilience, because sometimes it matters that other people care about something that only impacts you, right? So that being said, call to action and importance of unity. The unity is really important. You find common ground and find a way to help each other in the best of times and also in the worst of times. Thank you very much. I'll take any questions that you might have. Awesome. Sister Kathy, would you join me for a conversation?
Sure.
I'm here.
Well, this is a wonderful opportunity to really be able to affirm everything that we just listened to from Imam Idris. This is a great privilege. And I want to talk to you this afternoon about how so much that we heard from Imam connects with who we are as a college, a Catholic college founded by the Sisters of St. Joseph. And this does not make us different from what Imam shared. It really makes great connections. And some of those connections I'd like us to reflect on, if that's okay with everyone. So let me begin just where Imam left, and that is the importance of unity. One of the things as Sisters of St. Joseph that we say very clearly is that relationship is all there is. We don't exist except in relationship with others. And those relationships are not limited to just people we choose to relate to, right? It's a question that as Sisters of St. Joseph, we believe that we live and work that all may be one. And that all may be one, we say clearly, can have no exceptions. We eliminate no one from the oneness that makes us one human family, all together in creation, caring for earth, and returning on a journey to the one God. And one of the things that our latest Pope, Pope Francis, has stated lately is that there is only one God, but there are many paths that take us to that God. So it doesn't matter whether it's Muslim or Jewish or Christian and all the other faith traditions, and even people who don't acknowledge that they have a strong faith, but they're still on this journey to go home to the one God who is going to receive us all. And so I just think it's so wonderful that we work to be one community together. And I'll start by saying, for example, that Aziz and I have been friends now for a good number of years because we've worked on an interfaith community together. And so it helps us to know one another, to care about one another, to learn what each of us stands for. And one of the things that I always remember, because I know that Imam mentioned Martin Luther King Jr., and one of the things that not only do I teach about forgiveness, but one of the things that Martin Luther King said so clearly is that sometimes we hate people because we fear them. And we fear them because we do not know them. And we do not know them because we don't communicate with them. And we don't communicate with them because we're separated. Hasn't that been true for so many of us? Even now, when many people are fearing immigrants coming into the country, they don't really know them. Do they know any immigrants and see that they could bring something good to us? And many of them do and have. So when we fear people, it's usually because we don't know them. So it's so important for us to plan ways in which we come to know one another in common and important ways. And so much of what, Imam just was saying about the civil rights movement, it's so important that we realize that we are one country and one human family, whether we're Black or white or any other colors, it doesn't matter. So one of the things I like to say is that Black History Month is not intended just for Black people. It's intended for all of us as Americans, because we would not be Americans without our Black American people here with us. And so I'll say for myself, as a white American, I have to understand that everything that has happened to Black Americans affects me and us as well. It isn't something that just affects them. So one of the things I think we have to acknowledge, let me say this about anybody here who is a white American, we have to acknowledge that we had a role to play in the segregation, in the exclusion, in the lack of equity that our Black Americans faced. And so one of the things we need to do is to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge what we did to hurt others and to hurt our Black Americans. Unless we acknowledge it, we can't really heal it or be forgiven of it. You know, one of the great privileges that I have here as a sister of St. Joseph and one who has taught religious studies for 30 years, is that I teach a course on forgiveness and reconciliation. And we began an institute on forgiveness and reconciliation so that we could acknowledge that we live and work for people to be one, but there's a lot of healing that has to happen, isn't there? There are lots of divisions that go on. So we can't just say we live and work for all to be one. We've got to heal these divisions. We have to work for this. And if I could just tell you that, I just think it's so important. I'll just share this very quickly, but I did have a sabbatical. It goes back to 2006. And during that sabbatical, I spent a semester in Rwanda and learning from the African people of Rwanda what it meant to forgive and reconcile after a genocide that killed over 1 million Tutsis and moderate Hutus. In 90 days, over 1 million people were killed. And I began to read stories about Rwandan people who chose not to be vengeful, not to hold on to the hatred that so many of us feel after we've been hurt. And you remember Imam addressed that fact that we can't hold on to this hatred. It doesn't make us rightful. And I loved that quote from the Quran that you used. And I think, we certainly as Christians believe the same thing, that we're called to work, to heal one another, to love one another as we love ourselves. But when I was in Rwanda, I'll just share this one story that I worked with hundreds of Tutsi people who had so many of their family members slaughtered in the genocide. And you can imagine the hatred, resentment, anger that they carried in their hearts. And I could tell you so many stories, but what I learned was they began to realize that they couldn't live with this hatred, that they were prisoners of their own resentment and hatred. And if you're going to learn to forgive, you really free yourself. You become free. And so it was through them that I got to meet this group called Les Bons Samaritains, the Good Samaritans. It was an organization started in which they learned that they would bring the mercy of God everywhere that they went. And one of the things I love about our Muslim sisters and brothers is that we both describe God, Allah, as the merciful, compassionate one, whether we use Rahamin in Arabic, or we talk about the God who pours God's self out in love. There are all kinds of things. It's true in Hebrew, too. Their word rechem means the same thing. That I know, again, Imam talked about the faith of those who share the same scriptures, Christians, Jews, and Muslims. And the truth is we believe the same thing about trying to reflect the image of compassion. We're to be poured out love for one another. And the people of Rwanda brought me to prisons where I also spoke with those who murdered the Tutsis. And they had learned, as these Bon Samaritans came to visit them twice a week, they began to learn to repent and to be sorry and want to make restitution for what they had done. So that remorse and restitution is so important if you want to heal. Do you know what I mean? And so what happened was, when I was leaving Rwanda, the leader of the Good Samaritan said to me, "Sister Kathy, when you go home, we don't want you just to tell our stories. We want you to figure out where your divisions are and try to bring the mercy and compassion and forgiveness of God to them." I thought, oh, this is challenging. And so when I came home and met here, it was seen as just what the mission of the Sisters of St. Joseph and our college is, to really work for oneness and for healing. And so that's when we formed the Institute for Forgiveness and Reconciliation, so we could work toward that. And one of the leading things that I see as so significant for us as an American people is that we have to overcome the racism that has divided us for years. And we can talk about it ending in the 60s, but still the deprivation and the lack of restitution has not really totally gone away. And anyway, I could say so much about that, but you don't want to take a class right now. But I do think one of the things we need to pay attention to is that there has been a growing threat that I'm going to use President Trump's first, order, 2016 to 2020, to say that there was a growth in white nationalism. Are you aware of that? A growth in white nationalism and even white supremacy. And I could tell you that there are polls that have opened where the Ku Klux Klan even grew stronger. And people began to really deny the fact that we are one human family. So one of the things that I want to celebrate as someone here at Chestnut Hill College is that we have such a diverse population. It's so wonderful. Nobody can be here at Chestnut Hill College without seeing a multicultural, interfaith group of people. I always say to the students, we're a small college, but you are not experiencing any kind of uniformity. We're all the same people together. You will not graduate from here with that sense that we all look alike, we all talk alike. You begin to love one another in our diversity. That's what it's about. How can we really use our diversity to model a life that really cares about one another? And it has nothing to do with the color of our skin. You probably acknowledge yourself that really what we hold in common is not the same language or the same color or even the same religion, but there is a language of the heart that unites us, doesn't it? It's like we all want to care for the same thing. We love our family. We love those who are mourning the loss of a loved. We have so much that we share in common. So if we can just find ways to share this with one another, and that's why just listening to Imam Idris and everything that he's been working with and concerned about leads us to say we all want to do this. And so promoting some more civil rights movements, for example, we try often to be a part of the nonviolent protests that you were describing. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a movement that our sisters at our Welcome Center shared with the Sanctuary movement here in Philadelphia, in which we took this walk saying that as a sanctuary movement, we were supporting our immigrants. We are not going to allow them to be deported. And we had this wonderful walk where we ended up in Philadelphia you probably know where that place is that has the love, love. And we huh? Yeah, I love her. Now it's Love Hurts. Yeah, we know that. So anyway, we went to that love movement and we covered it with black, paper or black cloth that said, how can we hide the love in the city by thinking we will dismiss our immigrants? No, we're going to work for them. And I have to say, one of the good things is that our mayor was there too, supporting that same thing. So I think that's great. And I think we need to work together. So again, as Imam said, we have to know what these new laws are threatening and say, we are going to work against this. As Sisters of St. Joseph, we published a statement about our new administration and what our commitment to work that all might be one would lead us to do. We're not going to violently fight or try to polarize ourselves from those who don't agree with us, but we're going to find ways to speak out, to move forward. And so we don't want to do it alone. We want to do it with all our Muslim sisters and brothers, and we also want to do it with our Jewish sisters and brothers. So we had a big walk last October or November where a rabbi that we're friendly with, Nancy Kramer, she started this walk, and I was supposed to bring Christian friends. So we had Christians, Muslims, and Jews. There must have been 700 of us who walked all the way through Chestnut Hill, up and down Germantown Avenue. And it was great because so many people stopped us. They were coming out of stores and restaurants and, what are you doing? We're having this walk for peace, So I think we're all trying to do those things. And we're looking forward to all of us working together to do that. And as I look at you, you all look so committed and engaged and caring. So makes me feel like, no, we have good opportunities coming to us. And one of the last things I know that Imam said was how important it is to have youth committed to this. So we're trying to do that as a college to really help our young people understand that we need them. Our future will depend on them. And so we're really trying to empower them to take care of one another, to listen to one another's stories, because if we know one another, we'll care more about them. We won't be afraid of them. We'll include them in who we are. So that's one of the efforts we're trying to do. And we have, you don't need me to say all this, but I'm looking at Bethany. Bethany Welsh is one of our sisters who is the director of our St. Joseph Hall, which is finding housing for college students who are homeless. So we have a lot of things that we're trying to do, but we'd like to get everybody included, right, Bethany, in different things, whether, you don't need me to tell you all these things now, but we do want people to be aware of all the things we're trying to do so that we can all work together to help to make our world more one and to help to heal the divisions that are dividing us and not allow the threats of this new political administration to take us from our goals. So we will see evil, we will see bad, we will see negative things, but we also have to see the good things that are here. And all of you are examples of the good things that are here. So we won't give up. We will work for healing and for oneness among us. So that's partly what I want to say.
Rod? Thank you so much. So I'll take a few questions if you all want to, if you have any questions.
We wanted to open the last part for questions and comments. It could be a comment as well as a question.
And then, Sister, what I'll say just to add on to what you said, there's a scripture in the Quran that essentially says that God made us into nations and tribes so that we may know one another, right? And that is critically important, right? Because the differences in how we approach, how we even, the accent that some person has when they speak English, it tells me about where they're from, what food they may like, what may be the history of their people, what the weather is like where they're from, right? All those things are important to engage and connect. So God made us different, not to despise one another, but he made us different and made us into nations and tribes so we'll know one another, right? And get to understand each other. And there's another rich tradition that comes from our prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, where he says that that none of you are truly are brothers until you want for your brother what you want for yourself, right? And so if we see humanity as our one brotherhood, one sisterhood, we should want for our brother what we want for ourselves. And this is the same thing that is repeated in Christianity, is repeated in Judaism and all the great religions, right? Protecting one another's rights, but also being conscious and connected to humanity to understand that we all want the same things. We all want to live in safety. We all want to be able to take care of our families, be able to provide a living, right? Worship our God, and be able, to be a part of what is good and beautiful in the world. And I just think that is enough common ground for us to work together towards anything that is worthy of our efforts. Yeah, so.
Yes, I see some hands now. So I was going to comment myself. Go ahead, please.
Yeah.
All right, give me the last part of your question again.
How could we how can we meet the youth where they are? Because I was just saying, like, surveying in the room, it looks like it's a lot of faculty and staff here. So just how can we bring like these movements and the information to the younger generation?
So something I've been apt to do, like if I was here at Chestnut Hill College, right, I would get your name, I would get your contact, and I would enlist you, okay? And I say that because representation matters, right? I used to be a young guy. I'm starting to get up there now. Got a few gray hairs, you know what I'm saying? And people that are my age and see me as younger or see me as a reflection of themselves tend to respond to me, right? But if I want people 20 years younger and they're 20-somethings in the teens, right? I would typically find a like-minded 20-something or teenager, and I would deputize them, right? I would share with them what the vision is, share with them where we're trying to go, and then supply them with what they need to go and grab the people that they have influence over, okay? So I just think, I think sometimes we as adults and adults, right, older adults, right, tend to think it's for us to solve, right? And it's not always that way. We may have what needs to happen, but we also don't always have the reach to younger people. And we have to acknowledge that and then, again, form alliances with people who do have the reach and deputize them and bring them into the fold. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add to that one of the reasons why we're trying to empower the younger generation so that they do have that kind of ability. And you probably know this, as we're teaching our students, when we get the students themselves to share what's going on and what's happening in them, it's that peer level commitment that really inspires people, because you see people your own age caring about the same thing. It's not just something your teacher's trying to impart to you. You believe this yourself, and that's so important. And one of the things that I would add, which you're probably aware of too, is that what we're trying to do as communities of people united with one another is that we live in a culture of isolation, don't we? It really, isolation has been more just taking care of myself. And that kind of selfish posture has so divided us. And sometimes people say it hasn't gotten better since the pandemic. Some people said it could even have grown worse. And so we're trying to advocate such an alternative to a culture of isolation. No, we only grow together. And the documents of Vatican II, Gaudium and Spes, says that God does not save us as individuals. God saves us as a community. We need one another. We don't survive without one another. And we don't want to disconnect anybody from that.
I'm going to follow up on Danielle to you, Kathy, because I don't think our students are all in this room today.
No.
Okay. So I think one of the questions is, how do we help opposing groups explore where their thinking came from? This was the best thing I read right after the election. It was a series of people responding to the election, and one was George Saunders. He's a Black African-American fiction writer, and he created a scenario where two groups of people were duking it out, and then he says, look at them duking it out, and they don't even know. They're not their own ideas. They're speaking in ideas that they've received somewhere else. You said to me years ago, maybe the first religion class here when we were doing the core curriculum should be to unlearn a lot of things that...
Oh, definitely.
So, I think that's part of it, Danielle, like helping people. And I'm trying to learn in a classroom, okay? So for 30 years, I've been saying, no, I don't think that's quite right when somebody gives an answer. And I'm trying to say, what makes you say that? Mm-hmm. Like, what makes,
your perspective.
I think we have work to do here. We certainly have work to do in the
Definitely.
Church of America. But I think Danielle's onto something.
Yeah, I agree. Very clear.
Yes, my question is for both. Okay, it's actually a couple questions. My first question is, given the recent climate right now, where the society is, what do we have to do to not only save what's currently in place, but how do we try to help? How do we help, create the kind of American society, diverse society we want to see, in this climate, at least for the next 4 years. Okay, then my second question is for you. What's your name, Miss Dale? Sister Kathy. Yes, I'm an alumni of the college, class of 2017. So I remember when I came here in 2015, 10 years ago, I remember there were some issues that the college was dealing with in terms of, race connections and everything. And, but I've seen as an active alumni, the progress the college has made, since then. So my question to you is, what do you think the college must continue to do to make sure that we keep it going in that right direction?
So just to answer your first question, I think first off, I think we ought to applaud the effort of Chestnut Hill College for even holding this event right now. I mean, really, this is a beautiful event, right? To bring a Muslim leader into a Christian organization, to share some part of African American history, some part of it mixed in here, some of the Muslim perspectives, is it shouldn't be as significant as it is, but it is very significant, and we want to make it a thing that is more normalized, right? Because, as Sister Kathy so eloquently stated, we don't know each other. And when you don't know each other, your true enemy can tell a lie about him to her and her to him and turn you against each other. You're filled up with ideas about each other that don't come from you, right? So the most radical thing we can do right now is get to know one another, right? Part of what gives me an advantage as an African-American Muslim in America is that when people speak about the Black Muslim community, where I'm from in Philadelphia, people know us, right? People know us from the activism. They know us from being a part of anti-violence movements. They know us from being against anti-drugs. They know us from our work, right? And they know us from being present in West Oak Lane. And so no one can necessarily tell our neighbors about us because they know who we are, right? And that's critically important in a time like this, because you're going to hear from a lot of people about who Mexicans are, who the people are that are coming across the border, who the people are that came in and are asylum seekers. You're going to hear a lot of that stuff, right? And until you get to know some of these people and understand what they are running from, if you understood the conditions that some people are escaping and what they're risking to come here, your heart would be a bit more empathetic to their situation. So I would just say the most important thing that we can start with is getting to know one another. And I think after that is understanding what the implications are of the changes that are being made. We are probably not going to be able to address them all in the next 4 years because they're coming so rapidly. It's like a blitzkrieg, okay? But taking account of them, prioritizing them, and then, again, mobilizing your base so that when the time comes, we can put people in place that can help us undo and advance some of the things that are important to our life.
I agree with everything that Imam just said. And I guess what I would simply add to the question that you asked, what can we do to really promote this kind of connectedness here at our college? One of the things that's very true for us is that we teach here at Chestnut Hill College many underserved students. And one of the things that's really important for us as professors is that we're not just concerned about the content that we're trying to cover. Do you know what I mean? Like, are you learning everything that I'm teaching? No, that isn't the only reason why we're in the classroom. We really want to care about each one of them individually. We want to learn their stories. We want to know what's happening. And just as you said, unless you know some of the immigrants coming into the country, you don't know their stories, you don't know what's preventing them from, like living more fully their college life here. We're really trying to get to know every one of them individually and then find ways that they can know one another. I have to say, that's probably as much work, if not more work, than the content that you're teaching, really caring about each one of them, trying to figure out what's happening in their lives. And I guess my hope is that after they graduate, they'll feel loved, respected, cared about, and be able to bring that to their families and to others. So do we know all that we're doing? Sometimes I still believe that thing that, sometimes we're just planting the seeds. We're not quite sure what's going to happen, 5 or 10 years from now, but hopefully it will have some positive effect if we're really caring about them. So it gives us a lot of work, which I'm sure all the professors here would agree to. And I hope you've experienced some of it from your professors as well.
Thank you both for sharing wisdom from the Christian and Muslim faith traditions. I do want to remind us all that both of our traditions stand on the shoulders of the Jewish tradition, which precedes us and is the foundation of the Abrahamic faith traditions. One of the wisest voices of the Jewish tradition, There are many of them. One that comes to mind is Rabbi Hillel. And these famous 3 lines that are eternal. He said, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? Meaning, self-interest is essential. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? Meaning selfish self-interest is not desired. You need to look after those who are around you. And the last lines are the ones that we know best. If not now, when?
Good afternoon. I'm a doctoral candidate from Drexel University, and I listened intently to both speakers. I just had some input to put in, and one of the more recent topics that was just brought up is that I was wondering, has Chestnut Hill College always been diverse? And I'm asking this for a reason. Last year, I went to a very nice Black History program at Villanova, and I learned and I went to Villanova, but I learned so much about all of the discrimination that was put upon the African Americans that wanted to attend Villanova, and they really had to struggle to gain footing there. Luckily, the athletics helped them to gain footing. Wait a minute, but if it hasn't always been diverse, when do you think it started to open up to accept the peoples of the world, if it's not any other way to say it? Just a few other things. The Interfaith Peace March started in 2005. But Masjid al-Law has been we always start somewhere and walk around and then end up somewhere. So twice, Masjid al-Law has been the starting and ending point for those gatherings. When we talk about the Great Migration, African Americans didn't just decide they wanted to come live in the North. That the treatment they received there, as described by Malcolm and Martin, is called vicious. It was very vicious in certain lands, and this is why all of our families, mine included, moved up from South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia. So that's a part of Black History Month. It's not to say we're just gonna wipe out the past and act like we don't know what preceded. Not saying that we hold grudges or hatred either, but we have to know the truth about why these things happened. Like I went to I'm also a behavioral health counselor for the school district, and we had a counselors meeting just Thursday, and one of the counselors said, "Oh, this is a land of immigrants, and this country isn't being operated the way it's supposed to be operated, and all this kind of stuff." And she said, "But I don't want to get political." So I said, "Well, you already are being political, because that's not true. This land is not a land of immigrants. It's a land of the indigenous people who were robbed of their rights, their birthrights." And so this is what I'm saying about we have to stay on point with the truth, although we have to be able to progress. And that's what I hear both of you talking about, how to progress beyond what happened in the past. We can't erase it. We can't act like it didn't happen, but not to harbor hatred in our hearts. And that's what I was hearing from both of you.
If I may. Thank you for making that point. I think it's important that you did make that point, because when I mentioned the Great Migration, what I stated very succinctly was that that many of our ancestors were essentially doing sharecropping at that time, which amounted to slavery, right? And there's no way that I could do just even that one thing any justice in a 30 to 40-minute speech. But I'm glad you did put a highlight on it because of the fact that I could tell the story about my own uncle who just turned 88 last week, and how he left Macon, Georgia, right? He was essentially, just couldn't go to the store and purchase, regular things that people need from a convenience store without being harassed and being talked down to and assaulted. And one particular day, he decided to fight back. And he knew that if he didn't leave the next day, that he would have been lynched. So that night, he packed his things and went north and didn't have anything, just what he had on his back, right? And there's plenty of family stories just like that, right? That we could go into depth on. But I think it is important for us to highlight that to a certain degree, just because of the fact that, right, that the pain of how African Americans were treated, and to some degree still are, it is intergenerational. I find myself tearing up at times for things that I didn't personally experience, right? But connecting with the pain of my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and the stories that are shared through our families. So we know not just what generally happened to African Americans with the Great Migration, but also what happened to within our families, and we carry those stories forward. And it's important to acknowledge it.
I think we're ready to wrap it up. I want to leave y'all with a parting thought. It is said the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy. When you don't even care enough to care, it is indifference. So hopefully we have learned, we have shared, and maybe it will motivate us to infect others with this radical love that we have, God willing. Thank you so much. Before we leave, I want to give a few parting gifts to our brother. No, thanks so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.